All right, so when you're a person like me who's been on YouTube for a couple of decades, you've made 5 to 10,000 videos in your YouTube career, you have to go and look for material, right? Someone just left a comment complaining that I sounded too digital, that I don't sound like I used to when I was running the channel without using AI. The problem with that is that channel got demonetized for that same reason: repeat content. And that meant that I wasn't able to create videos about the stuff that I want to talk about with interact with a more YouTube friendly interface, right? Like just me sitting there talking about it. That's what YouTube wants. It wants us to create content so it can use us to make money. That's why we're here. That's why we're all here. Everyone hopes that their channel will take off. But I've been told repeatedly that channels like mine don't take off because they don't feel human. And I'm like, I can't talk about this stuff with people who are out there actively looking for people to exploit. That's not what this channel is about. This channel is supposed to be about the topics that you're not going to hear about from CNN or MSNBC or even people who benefit from toxic positivity. In fact, ChatGPT created an entire script about how terrible toxic positivity is in our society because it forces people into believing something that's not real, that you have a good job, that you have a career, and that you actually have a shot at living a decent life. For the most part, everyone that I rub elbows with isn't living their best life. They don't have work flexibility. They don't have good benefits. They don't have people around them that they want to be around. No one likes their coworkers. But just like with any other relationship, you can't pick your family, you can't pick your coworkers, and for the most part, you're stuck. And now some of us have some real humdingers of parents or grandparents. Just look at the man who's running this country right now. Grandpa needs to have his keys taken away sooner rather than later before he ends up totaling the family car, which, I mean, on the path that we're on right now, you can't say things like that. If you're one of those people that it's actually thinking about buying one of those gold phones, please leave. Please leave now and never come back here again. And with that said, let's get into today's introduction. So, I looked up what was popular on YouTube, and it told me that interviews are apparently what's trending. So, I asked the machine to create the script, and here we go. You ever show up to a job interview in your best $6 Goodwill blazer thinking, okay, I just need this job so I don't have to ration my toothpaste again, and leave wondering if you accidentally enlisted in a cult? Because I did yesterday. This rationing toothpaste thing is coming up a lot. It's something that's part of nearly every single thing that ChatGPT writes for me. So I guess it must be popular to be rationing your toothpaste, which I mean, I guess you would just measure a pea sized drop of toothpaste so that you can make that toothpaste tube last for a year. I don't know how much toothpaste you guys use, but if we're rationing toothpaste, like I'm rationing my medications, uh, as a society, we're in a really, really bad place because we've gotten to the point where we can't put the toothpaste back into the tube. Can you imagine that if we could use toothpaste once and then somehow take it off of the brush ends and then push it back into the tube? Now, that would be a thing I would pay to see on the internet. All right, talking point number one. So, first of all, I get that they're really that. Sorry. So, first of all, I get there really early because, duh, I don't have enough going for me to also be late. I'm sitting in the lobby pretending not to notice they printed my resume in black and white, like I'm already dead to them. The receptionist gives me that smile, you know, the one it says, "Good luck, sweetie. I've seen what happens in there." Then this guy comes out, middle aged, wearing all birds, like that's supposed to prove he's a cool boss and not a corporate exec. Oops, corporate executioner. He says, "Hey, let's start with a little small talk." Big mistake, because now I'm talking about the weather like my rent depends on it, because it kind of does. So I remember this interview. I had it with a company that was, they have a couple of different locations, and I think it's called like Morgan's Network Company or something like that. Really generic name. I went in there. We talked about fishing. We talked about different places in Mexico. And at the end of the interview, they told me I had a great interview. And when I called back, they told me that I interviewed very poorly. And I was like, okay, number one, I don't have a car. So I had to bike here in the Arizona heat. And I told them that up front. It is really hard for me to get to places. And you know what? Thinking back on it, that was my first mistake. Nobody wants to know that you're so poor in a job interview that you're riding a bike. And since I've never owned a car before, I walked in and said the wrong thing in every one of those 100 interviews or so that I've been to throughout my entire life. No employer wants to hear that you don't have a car, because that means that you're either going to rely on rides from other people, or worst of all, the worst thing you can say to any employer in America is, "I ride the bus." Because the bus means that you were never going to be on time. Because buses are notoriously terrible forms of getting around. They're slow, their schedule for them is awful. I've sat on a corner for 3 hours before, waiting for a bus to come by that was supposed to come by every hour. Why? Sometimes there just aren't enough people who are willing to take that crap job. Because being a bus driver is one of the beep beep jobs in the world. Just like working in sales, just like being a school teacher. Anything, any job that's considered low in society is going to be a job that's going to have unreliable people. They don't have a fingerprint scanner at the Kroger's to make certain that you are, and only you, are coming in and clocking in. That's there because they know that the people that they're hiring are terrible. When you're going to offer a person $15 an hour and expect anything more out of them than $15 an hour worth of labor, because a lot of companies will hire a worker for, let's say, $20 and then be very disappointed when they realize, I bought $20 worth of labor. This guy's good enough to dig ditches, and that's it. $20, you get what you pay for when you're buying labor. And these corporations act like every single person, and they start this in the interview when they're trying to decide whether or not you're going to be exploitable enough. That's what the job interview is. It's poking and prodding at you to see how much you're willing to take in the workplace for one low price. Talking point number two. He asks, "What's your 5 year plan?" And I'm like, to not be poor? Your 5 year plan is a really important thing, because when I first got out of university, my 5 year plan was to go back to the university and get a PhD. My 5 year goal did not involve stocking shelves, working at a call center, being unemployed for 3 years. But that's what I was saying in my initial job interviews when I got out of university in 2017, is that my long term strategy is to go back to the university and teach at the university. That was what I wanted to do. Little did I know that that was never going to happen, because when you're bouncing around like a ping pong ball among jobs that are so crappy you can't put them on your resume. And this is what I tell a lot of young people when I meet them. Where you're at right now, if you can't put that job on a professional resume, if it's such a crappy job that you can't use it in order to get a better job, you're wasting your time there. because every minute that you spend at a job that's absolute dog crap, you're wasting time because you can't put cleaning bathrooms at Walmart on a resume with college degrees. They'll look at you as if you're a complete retard. And I kid you not, because I've sat in those interviews and they're like, well, why is there this empty space here? And it's like, oh, because I was going to school. Is it always what I say? I was going to school. I was going to school. And they really like hearing that one. But if you tell them that you were delivering pizzas for Domino's, or you were working for a maid service, or that you were working at a gas station, whatever crap job you're doing right now, if it's not helping you, you're wasting your time. And getting to those 3 to 5 years of experience doing a job so you can get an entry level job is should be your top priority. Because if you're like me, you're just working a dead end job because you have to. And you keep putting out your resumes and no one's really interested. We're in a very, very tough job market right now. And when your reaction to an interview question in your own mind, you can't say the things that you actually want to say in job interviews because they'll instantly disqualify you. Any employer that hears that you you're struggling to survive is going to know that you're going to show up at work and you're going to be a person whose personal life interferes with their work life. Because if you're like my coworkers and you're trying to figure out how you're going to eat next week or how you're going to pay your bills or how you're waiting to get off from work at 5 so you can directly go and do DoorDash or whatever other driving job you have. That's not what you want. When I worked at Walmart, if the general manager found out that you had a second job, especially if it was another retail job, it was an instant termination because they have to make certain that you're available on their schedule. That means 24/7. Open, close, weekends, days off. They want to make certain that you've got nothing else going on because they want to they don't want to have to schedule heavy. If you guys understand what that means they don't want to have to schedule full amounts of people or have a full roster of people. They want to have the bare minimum amount of people, and when those people don't show up, they're going to call in Susie Rottencrotch or Johnny Sixpack. And if Johnny Sixpack doesn't answer the phone when they call, Johnny Sixpack is going to be put on the crap list. And that means that they're going to start looking a little closer at Johnny Sixpack because what they want is mindless obedience for the lowest amount of pay that they can get away with. And that's why job interviews are so important because it is to determine whether or not you are going to fit the company culture. And more so, we've gone to organizations that want 24/7 availability. When I worked at Kroger's, if you signed up at Kroger's with open availability, and that's what those words mean. Open availability means days off, it means holidays, it means every day that you don't want to work. If you take away your open availability, they will do this to you. One shift on the weekend for 4 hours. That's their way of telling you to get out without having to pay you unemployment benefits. I've seen it at every single company I've ever worked at. This is the way that they get you, and they're always looking to get you. So let's continue with this one. But instead, I say something fake like I want to grow with this company. But instead, oh, excuse me. Even though the company grows by laying off the bottom 10% annually, like it's a tradition, then it got weird. He leans forward like we were in a confessional and says, "Tell me about a time you failed." "Sir, I'm 25. I was born failing." That's funny. I tell him I once got written up for crying in the break room because I couldn't afford a tire. And he nods. That's a normal workplace story and not a red flag that capitalism is a hostage situation. I don't. Do you know how many times I've seen people crying in the break room because they didn't have anything to eat? I mean, if you're going to work in retail, you're going to see this every single day. I've seen people go back into the break room with 50 cent, the 50-cent meal, um, some water, a cup of noodles, and the expression on their face like, how do I run into oncoming traffic right now? The look on retail workers' faces or anyone working a crap job is just straight up fear. And I've said this on this channel so many times. If you're not scared right now, you're not scared enough about what's going to happen to you soon. Because our policy creators, our government, doesn't care if you're poor. They don't care if people don't have food stamps. But when it comes to spending $1 trillion in the Middle East on dropping God only knows what on people you've never met and don't care, then it goes clearly shows where their priorities are. Oh, you better show up every day at work and make certain that the machine keeps churning. But helping regular people, that's not part of what they want to do. That lady, the homeless lady that I've seen out there cooking in the sun for the last few weeks, they finally came over and picked her up. There is no sign of her shopping cart or her anymore. And I think, and I've often wondered this, like, can they take you off of the street if they determine if you're illegally sleeping outside? Can they put you in jail? Yes. Yes, they can. Because at least here in Tempe, Arizona, it is illegal to sleep outside. So if you're sleeping outside next to your shopping cart, you're committing a crime. And so I've always wondered how often they decide to enforce these types of rules because, in a sense, it's for your own good to get you off that street that's 115 degrees outside, right? But at the same time, well, helping people isn't exactly what the government's interested in. And we all know that. There is no social safety net in our society. If there was such a thing, we wouldn't have a minimum wage. We wouldn't have corporations that can treat people worse than dogs. At least there's a dog catcher that takes you to the shelter. There is yet to be a human catcher, right? There's no pound for humans where you can go adopt a homeless person and bring them into your home. And for people like that, the amount of horror stories of bringing the homeless into your home because you feel bad for them and then they murk you when you're in the bathroom, that's a reality of things because homeless people aren't like us anymore. Inside your brain, when you become homeless, you become interested in one thing. And you're talking about brutal survival in conditions out here, out there, that are also trying to take you out. The brain gets rewired. Crime for a homeless person is normal, is normalized. You can poop, you can pee anywhere you want, and you learn to be okay with it. Because what are you supposed to do? Grocery stores don't want you using their bathrooms. Fast food places have created rules like you must buy something in order to be able to use the bathroom. Everything in our society has been weaponized against the poor because any business owner will tell you they don't want those people anywhere near their establishment. All right, let's get into talking point number 3 before I run out of time. Then he goes, "You seem a little overqualified. Wouldn't you get bored here?" Overqualified is a job market code for "you remind me of someone who had dreams once that makes me uncomfortable." I have been to at least a dozen job interviews where they have said this to me. You would be bored here. And ChatGPT is absolutely right. It is a code. It is a code for someone that might not be as close minded as they want because corporations love yes men. Anyone who will never disagree with them and always just nod their head and say yes or shake their head and say no, Oh my gosh. The other, oh my God, that's a story for another time. Uh, there's always a lot of stress in the workplace. Even if you're a perfectly normal person, it's like putting a lab rat into a torture device and then wondering why the lab rat is losing all of its hair, it's running around in circles, it's jumping onto its back. Everything about the workplace and the lab rat, they collide with one another. Even motivating your workers can sometimes require a car battery attached to your lovely man parts in order to get you to do more. Everything about the workplace is supposed to be harsh. You are never supposed to feel safe at work because a comfortable worker is a lazy worker. A worker that lives in constant fear is the worker that's going to try. He's going to try to keep his job at whatever he can scratch at, right? But that's why they like to keep you the way that they are. So, all right, let's two more little sections here, and then we'll go straight into our conclusion. Then it gets let's see. Did I already read that? Okay. Let's see. Okay, right here. And then he hits me with the killer. Would you consider yourself a team player? At this point, I'm thinking, is this a job interview or a loyalty test? So I give him the answer I think he wants. Yes, I love collaboration. But he starts like he's trying to see if I'll crack under interrogation. Bro, I'm not applying to the CIA. I just want health benefits. I used to have a teacher in college who would always look at me because I didn't like working in groups at all. And I didn't like it. I just don't like collaborating. I'm not a people person per se when it comes to collaboration. And this teacher would always give me the eye. Whenever he said group work, I'd be like, put on my backpack and I'm heading out the door. And every time you saw me do that, this professor would say the same thing. Millennial Steam, I'm going to remember this moment at the end of the semester when I'm calculating your participation grade. And some of these pieces of craps would would make it so that if your participation grade wasn't high enough, you could get perfect scores and everything else, but your participation grade would be like 15 to 20% of the total class. So imagine that. If you didn't get perfect scores, the best grade that you could get in that class would be an 80%. So even though you did everything correctly, you got 100% on everything, they would still deep six you on participation. Because these professors run these courses like little Napoleons. Let's just put it that way for a better use of a word that I can't use on this platform. All right. Oh my God. I wish I had more time to read this last section out, but at 20 minutes, I just can't justify spending more time talking. So let's read our conclusion. So if you've been there, if you've sat through an interview that felt more like psychological warfare than a hiring process, you're not alone. You're just living in late stage capitalism where being poor means you have to audition to survive. Like, I'm not asking for a throne. I just want a job where I don't have to cry in private. And that too much to ask for? Almost any interview that I've seen online with an Amazon worker involves at some point during your shift or crying before you go to work or crying when you get home from work or crying in the break room. How is that acceptable that we treat people like that? If you're crying in the break room because you're not going to be able to pay your rent this month, or if not being able to pay your rent is all you think about while you're at work, or you are an Amazon worker and you heard that Bob in another part of the warehouse got sucked through a 6-inch hole by a machine and no one stopped working. These corporations really, I mean, they might as well straight up chain us to the wall at this point because it is getting ridiculous. You know, the amount of torment that the average worker takes just in the interview, just to get to a position to be exploited, to assume the position is getting hilarious. But with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.